Okay. First I want to welcome you to the Breton shell fitting system. This is a system that we've devised to be able to do a custom casting on any horse with accuracy. When we get finished with this, we can either use the casting to fit a conventional saddle tree with, or to make our shell pad on, or a finished saddle on. This is a casting that we've done and set it on the stand to let it cure. The tools that we need to do this with, and what you'll get in your kit, number one is a flexible architectural rule to do the fitting across the back to make our cradle to set the pad on or the shell on when we get it cast. This is a measuring device to measure the rigging positions on a horse before we ever start the system. We're going to measure from behind the elbow. This will go next to the elbow. We'll put a chalk line on each side, turn it, line the front line up on that line, get us a second location on this line. When we do that, then we're going to use the flexible rule to bend over the back right in that line position. This is after the pad's been put on his back and taped down. We bend that over his back in that area right on top of the pad. Carefully take that off. That'll go on a cardboard template and be marked off and then cut, and it'll look like this when you're complete with it. We assemble it. The shell will sit on top of that cradle to let it cure, and it'll stabilize the shell in shipping back to us, also stabilize it while we make the shell off of the casting. Again, the tools that you've got, and these need to be returned when you get through with your casting. It's either a good sharp knife, good sharp pair of scissors, piece of chalk. This is our stretch plastic that we're going to wrap around the horse to hold the pad in position. Our flexible rule. And then our cardboard blanks to do our cutout for our stand. The last thing that we've got is the plaster blanket. This blanket has the rigging positions marked on it, the two lines. Also has a center line down the spine line and a split to go over the wither. As this thing comes together, we put the pad on the horse. After we do our line locations, we'll have the chalk lines on the horse's side. We line the pad up on those lines, and then when we wet the caster, or the plaster cast blanket, it will lay on the horse's back and line up on those lines to give us accuracy. We're going to go out in a few minutes and do a casting on a horse. He's got kind of an extreme back. He's got some deep depressions behind the scapula, and when we form this pad down on his back, it may require wetting the felt to get it to form down in there to give us a good definition in there. And a lot of times when this happens, if you have a deep depression and a large scapula up there, when we have the plastic over that area, it'll bridge, so you have to take your scissors and cut that plastic to relieve it so the cast can get down next to the blanket to get a good accurate takeoff. When we get through with this, after the casting has been done and returned to us, we make a shell off of the thing. It goes in the pad just like this. This has got a fiberglass shell in it that protects that back. You can put any saddle on top of this thing without creating a problem on that horse's scapular area in particular, or anywhere else. It distributes the weight over a broad area and relieves any pressure points that we may have in it. Okay, now we kind of chose old John Wayne here to cast him. He's got some problems up here that really need to be addressed. I mean, he's got an obvious, really high wither to him. He's got a little depression behind the scapula and a raised spine. So that's a little bit more of a challenge than a real smooth back. To start the process, the measuring template is the center bar in the stand, and we use that to put next to his elbow to give us our first reference line. Once you get that line marked, you turn it up and use the rear mark for our second reference point. These are rigging positions. Okay, after we get our reference lines in there, we put the pad on him. Now I've wet this pad a little bit so it'll form down into that scapular area, in that depression area. Make sure I get the seam right down the spine line. Line the two marks on the pad up on the two marks we put on his side. All right, now to make sure that we hold that pad down in there tight and get a nice takeoff, we're going to wrap him with the stretch plastic. You don't need to pull this too tight, just tight enough to make it hug down to his body nicely. Go as far back as you can without flanking him. So we pull this pad down nicely back here. Okay. Now that we've got that down, pad seems to be down nicely next to him. Now in this area right here, we've got a little bridging right in that depression. So we need to split that plastic to let the cast get down in there. We'll split it on that side, just cut right there. That allows, now that the plaster casting won't stick to that pad. It's just fine without that there, but it's holding the pad down pretty nicely everywhere else. Okay, now we're going to do our bend. Here's the mark on the pad, and we're going to do a bend right in that mark. Line that side up. Let's see, let's get it centered first. Bend the center. Got right on the spine. Get right on that line and then bend it down to make sure we've got his body perfectly molded. You got it there? Okay, just very carefully pick that off because it bends really easy. Lay it on a piece of cardboard, on your cardboard, and try to center it with your mark, and then draw this area off. And we mark this the left side. In case he's deeper on one side or something, we keep this to the side that we cast off of. Now we're going to do the same thing for the rear on the back line. There again, get the center of your rule, put it on the stitch line here, and then bend it right over our marks. Now, if this guy's got an exposed spine line, so we want to make sure that we mash this down into that area. Okay. Lay it down. And we're going to mark this off. Be careful not to push the rule. It's very easy. Okay, and this is left rear. This is left front. Okay, and before we go on and do our casting now, we're going to cut this template out and put our stand together. Okay, we've marked our templates and we've cut it out so we can assemble this. This is the rear left. That goes into that slot. This is our front left. Line those up. Set our stand up there. Now that's going to be our cradle to hold the cast until it cures. It's also going to be our stand to put it in a box and ship it back to us. We also use that to do our work on, so we keep the casting really uniform. And the next step is take the wither relief area that we've cut in here, put it on your left so we can get it on his back. And when we wet this, we want to make sure we get the center line right down his spine line so we have equal amounts of plaster on either side. And when you go to wet this, you can fold this thing, just dunk it very fast in the water, squeegee out the remaining water. Warm water will make this thing will work a little bit faster. If it's cool weather when you're doing this, pretty hot water will just make this thing set up quick. Just put it in there. Don't let it soak, it absorbs water immediately. Okay, we're just going to unfold the blanket. And lay it up there on that pad. Line your lines up with the lines on the felt pad underneath there. Make sure you get those things in line. Make sure you get the center mark down the spine line, right up over his wither, and then kind of stretch it out. Just squeegee the excess water out of the blanket. That'll make it cure a little quicker. Keep the front end of it kind of up on his wither there. He has a pretty exaggerated wither there, and you may need to cut this a little bit more. This is molding to him nicely, so we don't need to do it. Just leave it on there, smooth it out, get that excess water out. Make sure it forms down in this depression well and up over his scapula. Make sure it's down in the back. Form down over that spine pretty good. Okay. Now this is done probably, depending on the temperature of the water, the outside temperature, you're going to have this on his back anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. You want to try to hold him square, keep his head at working level, straight with his spine line. Don't let him turn his neck, because that'll distort his back a little bit and distort our casting. So hold him as uniform as you possibly can. If he won't hold still, if you've got a horse that's pretty nervous about it and he's pretty active, instead of just lifting the cast right off of the pad, you may want to carefully cut the plastic, wrap it up over, take blanket, pad, and the shell all at the same time, and put on our stand over here. This guy's really quiet. He's not going to do anything, so we'll just hold him still and let this thing cast. Let it cure, and then we will pull it off and put it on our stand. Okay, we've had the thing on his back and molded it on him. We've had it on here about 10 minutes now. The cast is setting up. It's not rigid enough yet to take off. It's still pretty soft up here. If we take it off now, it'll start. We need to give it probably at least another 10 minutes to cure. Okay, we've had the shell or the cast on there for 20 minutes now. Ideally, we like to leave them at least 30 minutes. Make sure it's really hard. This thing is still pretty tender and will bend, but it's rigid enough to take off and put onto the stand to let it finish curing. Very important point: before you ship this back to the factory, be sure and write your name, address, on the horse's name on the casting, so we don't get it mixed up with anybody else's. Now, ideally, we'd like to leave this on the stand and let it cure for at least 12 hours, preferably 24 hours, before you put it back in the box and return it to the factory. Now, if you just gently relieve that shell off of the pad, pick it up in the middle, put it on the stand, and line the lines up on the side of the casting with the cardboard templates. That'll hold it in the same position it was on the horse's back. Now you can leave it right on that stand to cure out, set it back in the box. Be sure to return the knife, a rule, the plastic wrap, and everything in the box to be able to get your credit back on the casting. This kit will be used to do our molding off of. We'll put a relief down the spine line to make sure we have plenty of spinal clearance on the thing. It's very, very important that we don't get any wither or spinal contact on this thing. Approximately 2 to 3 weeks turnaround time from the time we receive the casting until we can do a completed pad. Okay, to remove the plastic and the pad from the horse's back, just very carefully use a pair of scissors, cut that plastic, hand it to somebody on the other side, and roll it over the top and take it off.